Welcome to Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Air Check and Classic TV channel.
Those wonderful dances in El Monte.
Memories of El Monte at El Monte Legion Stadium.
Yes, indeed. I like to say that Ray Collins and myself wrote that tune a long time ago, and we started hustling it all over town in Los Angeles. This is when we were living out in the sticks, and we wanted to be teenage songwriters. And I think it was the first teenage song that I ever wrote. I thought, God, I like this stuff so much, and it must be so easy to write those kind of songs, but we really sweated our buns over that one, trying to get it together and make it really swell. So we wound up taking it to, of all people, Art LeBeau. And he says, well, I got a group. I got this group called the Penguins. You know, they made Earth Angel, you know. And a few of them are working at the car wash, but I can get them down here to sing this tune. So he actually brought the Penguins, or he purported these people to be the Penguins, to the recording studio and introduced them to us, and we showed them how the song went, and they sort of liked it, and it took about 2 or 3 months to actually get them to finally have a session and record the tune. They recorded it, and they put it out on the market, and it sold about 4,000 copies in New York, and nobody in El Monte wanted to even know about it. You know, they forget it. They don't like to be reminded that they live in El Monte, I guess, or that El Monte was really something spectacular. Well, there might be a few who like the idea, but Pandora likes it. But we still perform this tune on stage sometimes, you know, just for fun. Okay, the next record is from a Charlie Mingus album that I grew up with called Mingus Aum, and the name of the tune is Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, dedicated to Lester Young. Singing the Lucy-Mae Blues, one of my favorite records when I was in high school.
Okay, you are from Baltimore originally, you said earlier. Speaking of uptight towns.
Yes.
And
distressing, repulsive uptight towns.
How old were you when you came? Baltimore's the kind of city where people are always saying to you, but you haven't seen the nice part of it. How old were you when you came out to California?
About 10 years old. And first place we lived was Monterey, and the second place we lived was Pacific Grove, and then we moved to Southern California. So my first taste of California was up here in rain country.
Did you have a car early?
No, I didn't. My parents wouldn't let me drive because they knew that if I ever got my hands on a car that I would immediately disappear from the dismal places that I was forced to live in. See, my father worked for the government, you know, various things. He was either working directly for the armed services, or he was employed in the defense industry, and he was always forced to live in these really cruddy places, Monterey being one of them. And when we finally moved to Southern California, it wasn't much better because we wound up living in Lancaster, which is in the middle of the desert, and it's sort of a depressing place with, you know, well, just nothing happening there. So they made sure that I didn't learn to drive or anything. They wouldn't even sign a permit for me to take driver education in school. So I didn't get a car until I was about 23. But I absorbed enough of the legend and lore of the auto freak of Southern California to be able to write a few songs pertaining to that subject.
Back for a moment, when we were playing the Grunion Run,
Yes.
all of a sudden Dick Gale occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Southern California phenom that
Yes.
never made it past Bakersfield.
Well, I remember when Capitol Records paid...
Dollar guarantee.
That's right. They snatched him right up to make him the giant star that everyone knew he was destined to be, because everyone knew that surf music was really what was happening. Now, as we look back upon surf music as a phenom, and we can also look forward to a resurgence of surf music in the future, probably disguised as something else. Maybe the literal association between the music and the ocean will go someplace else. But the type of music, the style of the music may return. And there were some very interesting things happening harmonically in the surf hot rod type of rock and roll music. I remember especially a song called Summer Means Fun by Bruce and Terry. Have you ever heard that record?
Yeah.
It has some of the most interesting modulations in it, some really groovy chord changes. The words are a little puny, but
They had a couple good records.
Yeah.
They had other things to say.
but that one was really neat. And the little old lady from Pasadena, because I remember hating these records when they came out, because I thought, God, they sound so white and disgusting, and they're talking about a way of life I can't identify with. But then, if you back off, like, say, 5 years from when it was out, and you can say, well, haha, that's an old record, let's listen to it and see what it sounds like. If you just hear the music that was in it, there was some very ingenious stuff there.
You know, when we were playing the record with the fuzz tone on it, which is also the Grunion thing, you were talking about stumbling into that accidentally. Before that time, there'd been a record by Tony Fisher called The Big Hurt. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was the first record that had flange phasing, which is now so popular all over again.
Yeah. Do you know how that was supposed to have occurred?
I would imagine accidentally.
It happened accidentally in a transfer of the tape, and then they tried to duplicate the effect and couldn't duplicate it. Now this person, this electrical wizard, Paul Buff, heard that record too, and he said, well, I can do that. I can make that happen anytime I want. And he cranked out a country and western tune in Cucamonga that was never released in 1960 that had phasing on it. I have the master tape of the thing at the house. I inherited a bunch of old masters from the studio. And I heard this thing, and it has the date on the box, and it was a paid-for session that somebody came in and said, here, record me and do something special to it. And if you can imagine cowboy music with that, flange in it, it's really a peculiar sound. I understand there's a future development on that. There's the guy that was doing these effects in England. They call him George the Flange. He's a recordist. He's not an engineer. He's a guy like a maintenance man or runs the recorders that sort of gets credited for all the contemporary versions of the flange, has invented a thing called the Reverse Flange. The guy who engineered the Traffic album, Eddie Kramer, has told me that this device, which they're currently employing on some things they're recording now, will make a sound appear to come from behind your head. If you're listening to a stereo system and facing the speakers, something's coming out of the right and something's coming out of the left. When they push the button for the reverse flange, something will come from behind your head. And I was thinking the ultimate use of this effect would be to have some music going on, you're grooving and tripping out in a teenage psychedelic level, and then from behind your head you hear the heat come in and say, all right, this is it,
Yeah. Kramer also did a couple of Stones LPs and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And Blue Cheer.
Yeah, the new
Blue Cheer was what a group I wanted to ask you about how you react to them, because I see Blue Cheer as being today very representative of older rock and roll in a sense.
Why? Because they recorded Summertime Blues by Eddie Cochran?
No, because of the kind of audience they appeal to. That almost invariably, the people who dig Blue Cheer are young teenagers, but they're really super fans of them.
Well, I'll tell you the honest-to-golly truth. I've never heard their record, and we worked with them twice, and I was never around when they played. I don't even know what they sound like. All I know is legend and lore that they have a lot of amplifiers and they play very loud.
They play very loud.
I met the guys in the group, but I don't know anything about their music.
How about Rhythm and Jets? We got to play some of that.
Well, we
got Richard Berry around here.
Yes, I would like to pay my respects to Richard Berry because I think that he is one of the most creative forces in rock and roll music. He wrote Louie Louie, and the original version of Louie Louie is quite a bit different than what the King's Men eventually wound up doing to it, making a record that stayed on the charts for 200 years in Oklahoma and places like that. Richard Berry's version of Louie Louie in the mid-50s was revolutionary. It was the strangest thing that I had heard, you know. The harmonization of the group, his seventh chords and the things that, and the way they were voiced, and just the overall sound of the record was very fresh. You know, it was a departure from the rest of what was going on in rock and roll. And he's written a great number of songs, and a lot of them never got to be big hits, but I think they're all extremely good songs. And the other tragic aspect of the career of Richard Berry is that he never really made a lot of money from the things that he wrote, because in those days it was the standard operating procedure of record companies to sign the artists and writers to contracts with royalty payments so low that they're virtually non-existent. And then when it came time to pay them, they would explain to the artist that, well, it didn't sell too good, and
they charge them more fuss again.
Yeah, right. And they'd always stick the artist, and like the guy would, for instance, he would probably say to Richard Berry, well, we got you guys some wine when you were recording, you know, and we paid you $25 a day you made the record. What more do you want? And then, of course, they would give each member of the singing group 100 copies of the record that he got to pass out on the grounds at Manual Arts High School or something like that, and he gets to be a hero for a week at school, and then they would just sort of fart him off like that.
I think Richard Berry's Louie Louie was...
And the other side of it was very nice. You Are My Sunshine. This is a song called Daddy Daddy, which has a nice portrayal of a mid-50s father and his attitude towards the young boy coming to visit the young girl while they make out. Don't you just love those long teenage fade-outs on those old-time records where they keep saying the same thing over and over again to remind you of what the title of the song was? Could you ever forget the name of that song was Daddy Daddy by Richard Berry and the Dreamers? Could ya?
He had Ooh Ooh Get Out of the Car.
Yeah, and you know, Sammy Davis Jr. recorded that too. Can you imagine the comparison? You ought to play those simultaneously on the air.